The smoke of war hung heavy over the broken plains. Ash drifted in the wind, carrying the smell of burnt metal, scorched earth, and lives cut short. Broken machines lay scattered across the battlefield, their twisted frames jutting out of the ground like the bones of ancient beasts. The war between humans and the alien empire had turned this land into a graveyard. In the middle of it all stood a lone human warrior. His armor was dented, his shield cracked, and his sword smeared with dirt and blood from days of fighting. His name was not shouted by bards or carved into monuments, but every soldier who had fought beside him knew his courage. He was the kind of man who did not bow even when defeat seemed certain. The alien soldiers circled around him, their tall frames gleaming in dark armor, their glowing weapons raised and ready. They expected him to kneel to surrender like the others, but he did not. He tightened his grip on his battered sword and raised it once more, his breath heavy but steady. His comrades had fallen, their banners torn, their voices silenced, but he remained. From above, in a great hovering command ship, the alien queen watched. She stood tall in her throne chamber, surrounded by her generals. Her crown shimmered faintly under the dim light, her long hair flowing like strands of silver against her pale skin. Her eyes, sharper than any blade, followed the movements of the human warrior below. "Why does he still fight?" one of her generals asked in disbelief. "His army is gone, his cause is lost." "Because he is human," the queen replied softly, though her voice carried through the chamber with authority. The generals exchanged uneasy glances. To them, humans were fragile creatures, weaker than most alien species, surviving only through numbers and stubborn will. Yet here was one human, standing alone against a dozen of their finest soldiers. He did not break. He did not yield. The alien warriors charged forward. The human warrior blocked the first strike with his cracked shield, sparks flying as metal clashed. He spun, swinging his sword with surprising force, cutting through the enemy's weapon and knocking him to the ground. Another leapt at him, but the human ducked, rolling through the dust, and stabbed upward into the gap of the alien's armor. Even when struck across the back, he refused to fall. He staggered but rose again. From her vantage point, the queen leaned forward, her expression unreadable. She had seen many warriors, alien champions bred for battle, mercenaries with endless strength, but none fought with such desperate defiance. He was outmatched in every way, yet his spirit made him dangerous. She could not look away. The battle on the field was short. The human warrior's body screamed with pain, his arms heavy, his wounds deep. At last, the aliens knocked the sword from his hands and forced him to the ground. But even as they pressed their blades to his throat, his eyes burned with the same fire as before. He would not beg. He would not kneel. "End him," one of the generals said coldly from the command ship. "Let this foolish display be his last." The queen raised a hand, silencing him. Her eyes locked on the human warrior, who glared up at his captors with unyielding defiance. In that moment, something stirred within her. It was not pity, nor simple admiration. It was recognition. She had ruled her empire through fear, through power, through command. But here was a man who carried none of those things and yet still made even her generals uneasy. His strength was not in weapons or armor. It was something deeper, something rare. The queen stood, her voice steady but filled with an edge that silenced the entire chamber. "Bring him to me," she commanded. The generals turned, startled. "Your Majesty, this is a human warrior. He is the enemy. Her gaze cut through him like a blade. "Did you not hear me? Bring him to me." Order spread quickly. On the battlefield, the alien soldiers hesitated before lowering their weapons. They shackled the human warrior's wrists but did not kill him. Confusion rippled through the ranks. The enemy had been captured, yet the queen demanded him alive. Dragged to his feet, the warrior spat dust from his mouth and glared at his captors. He expected execution, humiliation, or interrogation. What he did not expect was to be taken to the throne room of the alien queen herself. As he was escorted into the grand chamber, his weary eyes lifted. The hall was vast, lined with towering pillars of obsidian and banners bearing the crest of the empire. At the far end, on a raised throne, sat the queen. She leaned forward slightly, her sharp gaze fixed on him as though he were more than just a prisoner. The warrior stood tall despite his restraints. His armor was broken, his body bruised, but his pride remained unshaken. He met her eyes without fear. The queen studied him in silence. Her generals waited, expecting her to order his execution, but instead she spoke words that froze the room. "I want him." The hall fell silent. The generals exchanged shocked looks, their faces pale. Had they heard correctly? The queen of the empire, ruler of countless worlds, feared by millions, had chosen to claim a human warrior. The human himself frowned, confusion flashing across his face. He had faced death many times, but never had he been claimed by an enemy ruler with such certainty. He could not yet understand what she meant, but he felt the weight of her gaze pressing down on him. And for the first time since the war began, the battlefield was quiet. Not because the fighting was over, but because the future had just taken an unexpected turn. The human warrior's footsteps echoed against the polished floor of the alien palace. Heavy shackles bound his wrists, but his back remained straight, his eyes sharp. Two alien guards led him forward, their armor gleaming, their tall forms towering over him. To them, he was nothing more than a dangerous prisoner. To him, they were enemies who had no right to drag him into their queen's hall. Yet there he stood, battered, unbroken, and filled with questions. The throne chamber was vast and cold, built with high arching walls of black stone. Strange, glowing, symbols lined the pillars, marking the history of an empire that had conquered stars long before humans had touched the skies. At the far end, on a throne carved from crystal and metal, sat the alien queen. Her presence alone silenced the hall. Her crown shimmered softly as light caught the edges. Her pale skin reflected the glow of the chamber, and her long silver hair fell across her shoulders like threads of moonlight. But it was her eyes, piercing, unwavering, that held the warrior in place. He expected hatred. He expected her to mock him or demand his surrender. Instead, she leaned forward, her expression unreadable, and spoke in a clear, commanding tone. "Want him." The words struck the hall like thunder. Generals, nobles, and advisors turned in shock. Whispers rose, hushed but urgent. A queen demanding a human? Not as a prisoner of war, but as something else entirely. One general stepped forward, unable to hold his tongue. His armor clinked with each step as he bowed low before her. "Your Majesty, forgive me, but this is reckless. He is a human warrior. He is the enemy. He must not be allowed to live within these walls. He should be executed before he becomes a threat." The queen did not look at him. Her gaze never left the warrior. Her voice remained calm but carried a sharp edge. "I did not ask for counsel. I gave an order." The general froze. Every soldier in the room fell silent. The queen's word was law, and even the boldest dared not defy her. The human warrior narrowed his eyes. He was used to being treated as an enemy, used to being hated by aliens who saw humans as stubborn pests. But this was different. She looked at him not with disgust, but with interest, almost as if she saw something in him her own people lacked. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady despite the chains. "Why? Why me?" The question echoed in the vast hall. The queen rose from her throne, her long robe trailing behind her as she descended the steps with slow, graceful movements. Her guards tensed, ready to act if the human tried anything, but she waved them aside. She stopped only a few steps away from him. For the first time, he saw her not just as a ruler, but as a woman burdened by power. Her eyes, sharp yet strangely heavy, studied him with curiosity. "You fought when you should have fallen," she said. "You stood alone when all others were gone. Even in defeat, you did not surrender. My empire has strength, yes, but not what you showed today. That fire, it is rare. I will not waste it." The warrior frowned. "So what then? Am I your trophy? A reminder to your people of victory?" Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. No, you are not a prize. You are a choice. The generals shifted uneasily, their distrust filling the air like smoke. Another advisor, older and wiser than the rest, stepped forward cautiously. His voice was low but firm. Your Majesty, if you bring a human into your court, the nobles will rebel. Already they question your rule. This will fuel their fire. The queen turned her head slightly, her silver hair catching the light. Let them question. Let them whisper. I will decide what strengthens this empire, not their fears. The warrior said nothing at first. He could not deny the strange respect in her tone. She spoke to him not as a prisoner, but as if he were someone who mattered. Still, he did not trust her. He had fought against her armies, seen their cruelty. He could not simply forget the dead who had fallen. You think I'll serve you? He asked bitterly. No, she replied calmly. I think you will choose. That is what makes you different. My people obey out of fear. You fight out of choice. That is why I want you here. Her words unsettled him. He had never expected an alien ruler to understand the heart of humanity. For a moment, he wondered if she was sincere, or if this was another trick of politics. The queen gave a small motion and the guards loosened his chains, though they did not remove them entirely. He rubbed his sore wrists, watching her with suspicion. You will remain in the palace, she declared, her voice carrying across the chamber. Not as a slave, not as a prisoner, but under my protection. The hall erupted in whispers. Protection? For a human? Generals clenched their fists in anger. Nobles exchanged sharp looks, plotting already. The warrior stood tall, his eyes burning. And what if I refuse? The queen tilted her head, her expression calm. Then you are free to die here, on this floor. But I think you will not. You are too stubborn to throw away life so easily. He met her gaze and found no mockery there, only certainty. The chamber grew tense. Around them, the alien court waited, caught between outrage and disbelief. They could not understand why their queen would risk so much for a human. Some looked at him with hatred, others with curiosity. For the first time, the warrior realized the danger he was in was not from the queen herself, but from those who surrounded her. If she truly meant to keep him alive, then her enemies would see him as a weapon to use against her, or a target to destroy. That night, he was led to a chamber within the palace. It was not a prison cell, but a guarded room with food, water, and a bed. Still, he did not sleep. His thoughts turned over and over. Why would she choose him? Why risk her throne, her power, for one human? He remembered her words, quiet but sharp as a blade. I want him. And though he did not yet understand her reasons, he knew one thing clearly. The war had not ended with the battle. Something far greater had just begun. The alien palace was built to intimidate. Its tall arches reached into the shadows and its walls were carved with ancient symbols of conquest. Every step the human warrior took echoed in the wide corridors. Alien guards followed him at all times, their hands close to their weapons. To the palace, he was an intruder. To the nobles, he was a danger. To the soldiers, he was the enemy who should already be dead. And yet, by the queen's command, he lived under her protection. He walked through the halls with silent defiance, never lowering his head. Whispers followed him wherever he went. Alien servants stopped their work to stare, then quickly turned away in fear. Some nobles looked at him with disgust, others with curiosity. His presence was like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading across the entire empire. But the queen remained firm. At dawn each day, she summoned him to her council chamber. While her generals reported on battles and her advisors argued over politics, she let him stand by her side. His chains were gone, though guards remained nearby. He never spoke out of turn, but his very presence unsettled the court. One morning, a noble finally dared to voice what many thought. He bowed before the queen, but his voice was sharp. Your Majesty, forgive me, but this human should not stand here. He is an enemy. To keep him so close is to invite betrayal. How can you trust him? The queen did not answer immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze to the warrior. Tell them why, she said calmly. The court grew quiet. The warrior blinked, surprised. She was asking him to speak for himself. He looked around at the faces staring at him, faces filled with hatred, doubt, and fear. Slowly he lifted his chin. You ask why I am here? I did not choose this place. Your queen brought me. But if you think I will bow or beg for mercy, you are wrong. I stand because I will not kneel. Not to you. Not to anyone. Gasps filled the chamber. The nobles stiffened. The generals scowled. Yet the queen's lips curved into the faintest trace of approval. Do you hear him? She asked her court. He does not speak as a servant. He speaks as one who chooses. That is what makes him dangerous and invaluable. The nobles exchanged nervous glances. None dared challenge her further. In the days that followed, the warrior began to see the empire's true face. Though mighty, it was cracked with fear. Nobles whispered against the queen, generals plotted in shadows, and servants moved quickly to avoid being noticed. He realized her throne was not as stable as it seemed. And then came the first attempt. It was late at night when he heard the sound of movement outside his chamber. His instincts sharpened. He had survived too many battles to mistake silence for peace. Slowly he rose, his hand closing around the metal pitcher of water from the table. It was the only weapon at hand. The door slid open and a shadow slipped inside. A blade glimmered in the faint light. The warrior did not hesitate. He lunged forward, swinging the pitcher with all his strength. It struck the assassin's wrist, sending the blade clattering to the ground. The two struggled, grappling in silence. The assassin hissed, but the warrior forced him down, pressing a knee against his chest. Before the assassin could recover, guards stormed in, alerted by the noise. They dragged the intruder away, leaving the warrior breathing hard, his shirt torn but alive. By morning, word of the attack spread through the palace. The queen summoned him at once. She looked at him, her eyes sharp with both worry and fury. They dared to strike at you? He raised an eyebrow. Not me. You. They wanted to use me to weaken you. Her jaw tightened. She knew he was right. Assassins had tried to kill her before, but this was different. Now they sought to destroy what she had claimed, to break her authority by cutting down the one human who stood beside her. That day, the queen gathered her council. She announced before them all, "The human will remain under my guard. Any hand raised against him is a hand raised against me. Let every noble hear these words." The chamber grew tense. Some bowed in reluctant obedience. Others clenched their fists, anger simmering behind forced silence. The warrior standing at her side realized the truth. Her enemies were not just his, they were hers. As days turned to weeks, an uneasy bond grew between them. She asked him questions about humanity, about its struggles, its strengths, its weakness. He answered honestly, sometimes bitterly, sometimes with pride. In return, she spoke of her empire, of how power was maintained through fear, of how loyalty was rare. She admitted her loneliness, not as a queen, but as a leader trapped in a cage of politics. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, she paused beside a pool of still water. Stars reflected in its surface, the same stars humans once dreamed of reaching. "You think me strong?" she said quietly. "But even a queen must watch every step. My crown is heavy with knives pressed against it." He studied her. For the first time, he saw not just the ruler of an empire, but someone carrying the weight of survival in a world of traitors. "Strength isn't about crowns," he said. "It's about standing when you should fall." Her gaze softened for a moment as if his words touched something deep within her. But peace was short-lived. The whispers of rebellion grew louder. In hidden chambers, nobles and generals plotted to overthrow the queen. They saw her protection of a human as weakness, proof she no longer ruled with the iron hand her empire demanded. Soon, secret messages reached the warrior's ears as well. Some aliens approached him in shadowed halls, offering freedom if he betrayed her. Others threatened him, warning his death would come quietly one night if he continued to stand by her. But he did not waver. Each attempt to sway him only sharpened his resolve. Strange as it was, he had begun to see her not as an enemy, but as someone who fought battles as hard as his own, just different in form. The turning point came when a gathering of nobles forced a council vote. They demanded the queen remove, the human from the palace claiming his presence endangered the empire. The hall was crowded, voices sharp with anger. The queen stood tall, her robe flowing behind her, her crown gleaming in the torchlight. The warrior stood silently beside her, his face calm, but his muscles ready. One noble shouted, "He is a human! He has no place here! Every moment he remains weakens your throne." Another added, "Remove him now, or face rebellion." The queen's eyes burned with quiet fire. She rose from her throne, her voice echoing through the chamber. "You fear him because he is human. You despise him because he will not kneel. But hear me now, he is under my protection. Remove him." Her voice sharpened like steel. "No, I claim him. He remains." Gasps filled the chamber. Some nobles bowed in defeat, others stormed out. In rage, the warrior met her gaze. For the first time, he understood the weight of her earlier words. "I want him." It was not possession, it was choice. She had chosen to trust him, against her empire, against her council, against the tide of fear. And though he did not say it aloud, he knew his own choice had been made. He would stand, not as her servant, not as her prisoner, but as her shield. Lines between human and alien blurred that day. He no longer belonged to one world or the other. He stood between them, and his presence would change everything. The palace no longer felt steady. Shadows moved in the halls, whispers grew louder, and eyes that once only stared at the human warrior in anger now glared with open hatred. The queen's decision to keep him by her side had split her court in two, those who remained loyal to her and those who wanted her gone. The warrior sensed the tension every time he walked through the corridors. The guards bowed to the queen in daylight, but clenched their weapons tighter at night. Servants spoke, less, their voices hushed, their steps quick. He had lived in battlefields, but the palace now felt more dangerous than any war zone he had seen. One evening, as the queen sat with him in the council chamber, a messenger rushed in, pale and shaken. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing quickly, "the eastern garrisons have declared themselves free of your command. Their general has sworn loyalty to the noble houses that oppose you." The queen's eyes narrowed, her voice steady. "And the Western Fleet?" "They hesitate." The messenger replied nervously, "But they will not wait long." The warrior understood immediately. This was no longer a silent rebellion. The coup had begun. The attack came faster than expected. At dawn, explosions shook the outer walls of the palace. Rebel soldiers, armored and armed, stormed the gates with banners of defiance. Loyal guards fought back, but the enemy had numbers on their side. The warrior rushed through the smoke-filled corridors, sword in hand, his heart steady. He had thought his battles were behind him when the queen had claimed him, but now he realized this was the true test. He found the queen in the grand hall, her crown gleaming even in the chaos, her robe flowing like fire as she issued commands. She did not flee, did not hide. She stood tall, rallying her loyal soldiers. When she saw him enter, she did not give orders. She simply met his gaze, and he understood. He would fight for her. The battle inside the palace was fierce. Rebels flooded the halls, their weapons clashing, against the loyal guards. The warrior moved through the fray with skill born from countless wars. His blade cut through the confusion, his shield blocked strikes meant for the queen. Again and again he placed himself between her and danger. At one point, a rebel soldier slipped past the guards, charging toward the queen with a spear. Without hesitation, the warrior leapt forward, his shield taking the blow. The spear cracked against it, but he drove the soldier back, his own sword striking with precision. The queen's voice rang out over the chaos. "Stand firm. Do not yield. Her words carried power, and her people held the line, inspired by her strength. Yet the battle did not slow. Every hallway became a battleground, every chamber filled with the clash of steel and the cries of war. The warrior fought beside the queen as if they had done so for years. She commanded with clarity, he defended with relentless will. Together they became the heart of resistance. But the true danger came not from the rebel soldiers, it came from the generals leading them. Late into the battle, as the halls filled with smoke, 3 armored figures entered the throne chamber. They were tall, ruthless, and skilled commanders of the rebellion. Their eyes burned with hatred not just for the queen but for the human at her side. One of them sneered, "You weaken yourself with a human pet. Today both of you fall." The warrior stepped forward, raising his sword. His body ached, his arms heavy, but his will was unbroken. "If you want her, you'll go through me." The generals laughed, but the queen's gaze hardened. She rose from her throne, her voice sharp as steel. "Then you will see what loyalty truly looks like." The battle was brutal. The generals fought with deadly skill, their blades striking with the precision of years of training. The warrior blocked, dodged, countered. Every strike against him felt heavier than the last, yet he did not back down. When one general tried to flank him, the queen herself drew a blade from the dais beside her throne. She was not a queen who hid behind others. She fought with him, her movements sharp and precise, her presence unshaken. Together, they turned the tide. The warrior's raw determination and the queen's command worked as one. He shielded her from killing blows, and she cut down those who tried to strike him from behind. At last, the 3 generals lay defeated, their rebellion faltering as word spread through the palace that their leaders had fallen. The remaining rebels hesitated, their courage breaking. Loyal soldiers surged forward, reclaiming the halls. The battle was over. The coup had been crushed, but victory had come at a cost. The queen leaned heavily against her throne. A deep wound across her arm, blood stained her robe, though she stood tall, refusing to show weakness before her people. The warrior rushed to her side, his hand steadying her. "You're hurt." She gave a faint, tired smile. "So are you." He glanced down. His armor was shattered in places, his body bruised, his strength nearly gone, yet none of it mattered. They were both still standing. The throne chamber filled with silence as the dust settled. Loyal soldiers dropped to one knee before their queen. Advisors who had doubted her now bowed their heads, fearful but respectful. The queen raised her voice, steady and unbroken. "This rebellion has failed because loyalty cannot be broken by fear, and today you all saw who stood by me when even generals turned traitor." Her gaze moved to the human warrior at her side. Every eye in the hall followed. The air grew tense. No one could deny what they had witnessed. He had fought not as a prisoner, not as a slave, but as her shield. The queen lifted her wounded arm and pointed to him. He stood when others fled. He bled when others betrayed. Remember this. He is no enemy here. He is my choice. Gasps rippled through the hall. The words were dangerous, powerful, undeniable. The warrior met her gaze. For the first time since their meeting, he realized something had changed. He was no longer only a survivor, no longer only a prisoner of war. He had become part of something larger, something that would reshape not just her empire, but perhaps the fate of both their worlds. That night the palace was quiet again. Fires were put out, the dead carried away, the wounded tended. The warrior stood on the balcony of his chamber, staring at the stars. He thought of his people, far away, still, seeing aliens as enemies. He thought of the queen, strong yet wounded, standing alone against even her own court. He had every reason to leave, to wait for an opportunity to escape. And yet, he found no desire to run. Something inside him had shifted. She had placed her trust in him. She had chosen him. And now, without speaking it aloud, he chose her in return. The palace was scarred by fire. Its once bright walls carried black streaks where flames had licked, and the floor still smelled of smoke. Rubble lay in corners, and soldiers worked to rebuild the broken gates. The rebellion had been crushed, but peace did not return easily. The queen sat upon her throne, her arm bandaged, her face calm, though exhaustion pressed against her shoulders. She had led her people through war, betrayal, and blood. Yet the greatest test was not the battle, it was the choice she had made. The human warrior stood beside her, his armor still dented, his body lined with bruises. He had fought through the rebellion as though it were his own war. He had taken blows meant for her, faced generals who should have ended him, and remained when escape had been possible. Now the hall was filled with nobles, generals, and courtiers who had survived the coup. They gathered in silence, their eyes fixed on the queen, waiting for her next words. The queen rose slowly from her throne. The great chamber, scarred but standing, grew utterly still. "My people," she said, her voice echoing across the chamber. "You have seen treachery in these halls. You have seen generals betray their oaths. You have seen nobles plot against the throne. And yet through the storm, we endured." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the crowd. No one dared move. "You wonder why we endured?" she continued. "It was not because of fear. It was not because of walls or armies. It was because of loyalty. True loyalty." Her hand lifted slightly, pointing toward the warrior at her side. "When others fled, he stood. When others betrayed, he remained. He is not one of you. He is not of my people. Yet he is the one who proved what loyalty means." Gasps rippled through the court. Nobles exchanged uneasy glances. Soldiers looked at the warrior with a mix of awe and disbelief. The queen's voice sharpened. "Hear me clearly. He is not my prisoner. He is not my slave. He is my choice." The words struck the chamber like thunder. Whispers rose, fearful and shocked. Some nobles clenched their fists in anger, others bowed in submission. But none could deny her authority. The warrior stood silent, his jaw tight. He had heard her words before in private, but to hear them spoken before the entire court, before the empire itself, was different. She had risked everything. Her throne, her life, her future, for him. At last he stepped forward. His voice was steady, clear, and strong. "I never asked for this place. I never sought your throne or your crown. I fought because it was all I knew. But when I stood here in your halls, I saw something I did not expect. I saw a queen who carried a burden alone, a queen who chose not out of fear, but out of belief." The court hung on his every word. "I am human," he continued. "I will always be human. But I cannot deny what I have seen. I cannot deny the choice you made. And so I make mine." He turned, facing the queen directly. His eyes burned with the same fire she had first seen on the battlefield. "You said I want him. Then hear me now, you have me. Not as a prisoner, not as a servant, but as one who stands with you." The hall erupted in gasps again. Some nobles shouted in outrage, but soldiers who had fought alongside the queen began to nod. They had seen the warrior's courage. They had seen him bleed for her. His words rang true. The queen's gaze softened, her expression unreadable, but her eyes bright with something unspoken. She raised her hand, silencing the noise of the court. "Then it is decided," she declared. "From this day forward he stands as my shield, as my equal in battle, and as the symbol that our empire will not be ruled by fear, but by strength chosen freely." Her words sealed the moment. The rebellion had failed, and now even those who still doubted her could not break her will. Later that night, when the court was empty and the palace quiet, the queen stood on the balcony of her chamber. The stars spread wide across the sky, the same stars humans once dreamed of touching. She leaned against the railing, her wounded arm resting carefully at her side. The warrior stepped out behind her, silent at first. For a while, neither spoke. The night carried a calm unlike the days before. Finally, the queen turned to him. "Do you regret it? Standing by me?" He shook his head. "No, I regret nothing. I have fought many battles, but this one mattered. Her lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile. You do not fear what it means? To be chosen by me? He let out a quiet breath, almost like a laugh. I have faced armies. I have faced death. Why would I fear you? Her eyes lingered on him, searching, as if to confirm the truth of his words. For a long moment there was no crown, no throne, no empire, just two figures standing beneath the stars, bound not by command, but by choice. In the weeks that followed, the empire began to change. Nobles who had once whispered in rebellion grew quiet. Soldiers spoke of the human warrior who had stood beside their queen. Stories spread across the cities of the day the queen declared, "I want him," and of the man who answered with loyalty stronger than any chain. Not everyone accepted it. Some still plotted in shadows, waiting for weakness. But for now, the throne was stable, and the queen's will was unshaken. The warrior remained by her side, not as a prisoner, but as her protector. Wherever she walked, he walked. Wherever she faced threats, he stood ready. He was no longer only human, no longer only warrior. He had become a part of something larger than himself. And though he sometimes thought of his people, of the world he had left behind, he knew his path had changed forever. For the queen had chosen him, and he had chosen her.